more than ever, with COVID-19 still circulating, we need help to reduce all avoidable risks. You can help protect the NHS, social care and loved ones by getting the flu vaccine. You may be eligible for the free vaccine at your GP or local pharmacy if you are over 65, pregnant or have a long-term condition. Find out if you are eligible at nhs.uk/staywell. Children up to Year 7 can get the free nasal spray at school or through their GP if they are below school age. If you are not eligible for the free vaccine, you can pay for it at your local pharmacy. The flu vaccination does not give you flu. It reduces the risk of catching flu, as well as spreading it to others. If you had the vaccination in the past, that will not protect you as the flu strain changes every year, so you need to have a new one this year. It is also important to wash your hands often with warm water and soap. Use tissues when you cough or sneeze, and bin used tissues as quickly as possible. Thank you for helping to protect yourself and loved ones this winter.
We're live.
Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
Welcome to this meeting of Nottinghamshire County Council Planning and Licensing Committee. I'm Councillor Chris Barnfather, the chair of the committee. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting, which is being held remotely, broadcast live and recorded for publication, with the majority of the members joining the meeting from their own homes. So as well as myself, the other members present in the meeting today are Councillor Pauline Allen, Councillor Andy Brown, Councillor Neil Clark, Councillor Jim Creamer, Councillor Sybil Fielding, Councillor Tony Harper, Councillor Paul Henshaw, Councillor John Longdon, Councillor Tracy Taylor, Councillor Keith Walker, Councillor Andy Wetton. We also have the following officers present today: Planning Group Manager, Mrs. Sally Gill; Development Management Team Manager, Mr. Jonathan Smith; Senior Planning Officer, Ms. Debbie Ragg; Senior Practitioner Monitoring and Enforcement, Mr. Tim Turner; Solicitor from Legal Services, Ms. Rachel Clack; and the clerk to the meeting today is Mr. Peter Barker. So this meeting of the Planning and Licensing Committee will be held in line with the new requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. So please do bear with us for any of you who are listening in if we're experiencing any technical difficulties or issues which do occasionally arise. If we do lose any members from the call temporarily, then officers will seek to assist in getting them reconnected as soon as possible, hopefully without the need to halt proceedings. Officers will inform the meeting if they are unable to rectify the problem and if we need the meeting to be paused or adjourned temporarily. If I can move on to the full agenda. Item 1 on the agenda is minutes of the last meeting of the 13th of October 2020, pages 1 to 16 in your bundles. Obviously, members have had an opportunity to look at those minutes. Is everybody happy with those minutes? I'm going to take it that everybody's happy unless somebody raises a hand to the contrary. Getting no indication, in which case I'll take it that those minutes are accepted and I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Item 2, please. Apologies for absence.
Sorry to butt in, Chair, but I've got no sound. Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you, Councillor Longdon, but you obviously aren't hearing me. Councillor Creamer, would you just like to speak and just see if it's my microphone?
No, you're perfectly all right, Chris, as far as voice and visual is concerned.
I think it's you that's having the issue here, John. Perhaps IT could give you a call and maybe talk you through it. Do IT, are you able to Councillor Longdon on his telephone?
I'll ask IT to contact them. Yeah, we'll get IT to contact them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll carry on with the earlier part of the meeting while we try and reconnect Councillor Longdon. So, item 2, please. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Madden sends her apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Item 3, declaration of interest by members and officers. A, disclosable pecuniary interests. And B, private interest, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. I'm seeing no indications from anybody, some shaking of heads. Okay, I'm grateful for that, Councillor Taylor. Sorry, Councillor Brown. I've got a hand up for Councillor.
I think I should just say, Chair, that the first item on the agenda is in my division.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Councillor Brown. That obviously doesn't preclude you from speaking, considering or voting on the matter, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. Item 4 then, please. Declarations of lobbying. No indication of any declarations of lobbying. Thank you. Councillor Longdon, are you now able to hear me? Councillor Longdon, are you picking up any of this meeting? Before I proceed on to item 5, have IT been able to contact Councillor Longdon?
ICT are in the process of contacting him now as we speak.
I'll just hold on for 2 minutes while you try to make contact with him before I actually move into the main substantive item of this morning's meeting. So if we do have any listeners, if you can bear with us for a moment.
Understood.
I can't find anything. Right.
You can actually hear him now. I don't think he realises it, Chairman. As he's talking, I can hear him.
Okay. He can't hear us though.
Yeah.
Yeah, approve.
Chairman,
50% of the way there.
Chairman,
I can't hear anything yet.
Chairman's now muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. Who was that speaking?
Councillor Harper.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I've just been through my emails this
I looked at
morning and
that
I've had
earlier, it seemed to work.
an email from Frack Free Missing. I don't know if other people have received it, so I ought to declare that, but having said that, I've not yet read it.
Yeah, what everything.
Doesn't relate to this.
It doesn't relate to anything on the agenda today.
Oh, that's okay then. As I say, I've not opened, I just saw an email on it.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. I think we've all probably had that same email, but it doesn't relate to a matter that we're considering this morning.
I've tried taking it off and putting it back on, see if there's an update yet, or bring it in, but it's not working.
IT, can you just ask Councillor Longden to maybe mute his microphone while you're talking to him, because we're picking up on the conversation.
I'll take my own mute off, it's gone. Can't hear them. Can you hear me or somebody?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Longden. Can you hear me?
Hear you, John.
More important, maybe. Apologies for this, colleagues, but we'll just give Councillor Longden another minute, and if not, we'll proceed without him.
Yes, can I say something, Christopher?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor
Can't hear
Longden.
you. Can't hear him yet.
You still can't hear me.
Whoever's on IT, can you just ask Councillor Longden if he's actually turned the volume up on his device? Not the mute button, but if he's actually turned the volume up.
No. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Yes, Chris can hear me. You can hear me? No.
Neil Clark's got a good idea there. F1 key, see if that works. He's muted himself with that.
It depends what device. I don't know what device it is on, Jim. That's the problem.
If it's on ThinkPad, it's the F1 key and volume down to F2, volume 3, F3, volume up.
Problem is, you can't hear us.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, volume of speaker. Yeah.
No.
Idiot, yes.
Yeah, IT, I think we're going to have to proceed without Councillor Longden. Can you perhaps remove him from the frame, because we're actually hearing your conversation? Okay, members, I think we'll get on with the business of the day. So if I can move to item 5 on the agenda, please, which is to vary approved layout of waste recycling facility at Loughborough Road, Bunny, pages 17 to 64 in your bundle. Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report considers an application for retrospective planning permission to regularise alterations that have been made to the approved site layout and working arrangements at the Bunny Materials Recycling Facility. This follows on from a review of the site by the County Council's Monitoring and Enforcement Officer in March of this year, who identified an extensive area of incinerator bottom ash, or IBA, aggregate storage on the eastern part of the authorised site, stockpiles of which had exceeded the 6-metre height that's permitted. The County Council requested that a planning application be submitted to regularise the unauthorised layout of the site, which is entirely consistent with national policy and proportionate to the suspected breaches of planning control within the authorised site, and also consistent with the County Council's adopted local enforcement plan. It is understood that the volume of IBA aggregate has increased on the site as there is less demand for manufactured aggregate due to the slowdown in economic activity. Furthermore, the pandemic has seen an increase in domestic waste generation, which has resulted in increased incineration of non-recyclable waste and therefore an increased generation of IBA. The applicant has also been receiving processed material from other waste operators which lack the storage space to maintain IBA aggregate stockpiles. The recycled IBA aggregate being received into the site is put through a secondary process to extract any further remnants of ferrous and non-ferrous metals, such as aluminium, that might still be left to achieve a higher quality finished product. The recycling facility is located to the immediate west of the A60 Loughborough Road, to the southwest of its junction with Gotham Lane. There is a residential property, Woodside Farm, on the opposite side of the A60, close to the site entrance, whilst Chestnut Farm and Hillside Farm care homes are located to the south of the site. To the north of the site, beyond the former Bunny Brickworks, lies residential development along Gotham Lane, including Greenwood Lodge Care Home, which is the nearest sensitive residential property to the site within Gotham Lane. More distant residential development is situated beyond Gotham Lane within Bunny Village on Main Street, some 750 metres to the north of the site. Also shown on this slide is Bunny Oldwood Local Wildlife Site and Nature Reserve, which lies to the southeast on the opposite side of the A60 Loughborough Road. The site benefits from screening from mature vegetation and bunding, including that along its southeastern boundary, providing screening along Bunny Hill, and there are limited viewpoints into the operational parts of the application site.
No sound whatsoever, can't hear a thing.
This slide shows the approved site layout, which comprised a separate area on the western part of the site for the screening and crushing of construction and demolition waste, and the IBA processing area, which was confined to the central part of the operational site, including a storage bay for the receipt of and storage of raw, unprocessed IBA material. This plan also shows the approved location of the early morning lorry parking area and an underused strip of land between the parking area and the concrete walled storage bay, which has now been brought into use for aggregate storage. The next two slides show two of the key elements of the existing permitted operations. This slide shows the processing of incinerator bottom ash using mobile plant within the enclosure of the existing concrete walled storage bay. The unprocessed raw IBA is delivered into the storage bay when it first enters the site and prior to being processed. In front of the screen is a pile of metals which have been screened out of the IBA, and to the right is the remaining ash. This next slide shows the waste processing building, where the IBA is further processed with other inert waste to create secondary aggregates. This slide also shows the trommel to the front of the building, which is used to further screen out the larger metal fragments and remove any remaining ash. Finally, this slide shows different graded stockpiles of processed IBA and inert aggregates. This next slide shows the site layout being sought planning permission, albeit that the layout has already been implemented, hence the retrospective nature of the application. The key changes being sought regarding the new layout include the use of the eastern part of the authorised site, which has been brought into use for the stockpiling of manufactured aggregates, whilst this area is currently being used to stockpile incinerator bottom ash aggregates, it could potentially be used to store inert aggregates from construction and demolition waste and soils if the market demands. The use of the western and central parts of the site for IBA aggregate and inert aggregate material storage, screening and mixing using mobile plant. This is the hatched area on the plan. A slight movement of the overnight lorry parking area, which now comprises roughly the same strip of land on the eastern edge of the aggregate storage area shown in block blue, but which extends further north by some 25 metres compared to the original parking bay. There will be no change to the existing arrangements regarding the limited number of HGVs leaving the site between 6 AM and 7:30 AM, and there is sufficient space to allow these 12 lorries to continue parking up in a forward gear the previous evening so that they can move off-site early the following day as quietly as possible and without the need for extra manoeuvring. To reflect these various changes, the application seeks to vary extant planning condition 1, which redefines the scope of the development, condition 3, which updates the schedule of the approved plans and supporting documents, condition 8, which updates the layout plan but continues to place controls over the receipt into the site of the raw IBA and its storage in the concrete walled storage bay. And finally, condition 20, again to update the site layout plan to confirm the minor variation to the designated lorry parking area. All other aspects of the development would remain the same, including throughput, which would remain at 100,000 tonnes per annum, and HGV movements, which would remain at 550 two-way movements per week and an average of 100 two-way movements a day. Objections have been raised by Bunny Parish Council and 3 local residents. Rushcliffe Borough Council, whilst raising no objection, has stated that this is subject to satisfactory additional information being received by the County Council in relation to vehicle movements and dust management, matters brought to their attention by the Parish Council. The key issues raised by the Parish Council and residents relate to dust, noise, increased traffic and health issues. The principle of using the site for non-hazardous waste recycling operations has been established under previous extant planning consents, and the proposed changes would accord with Waste Course Strategy Policies WCS 3 and WCS 8 by helping to achieve recycling targets in the county through the improvement of an existing waste management facility. The key is whether the proposed changes would have any unacceptable environmental effects, particularly in relation to the environmental and amenity impacts raised by the Parish Council and local residents. These issues have been assessed against the Waste Course Strategy and the Waste Local Plan for Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 1 and Part 2, and the MPPF. A brief overview of the main issues is now set out. In relation to traffic, the Parish Council has raised concerns regarding an extra 15 lorries, and residents have also raised concerns. The County Council has no evidence to support an alleged claim of increased lorry movements. The applicant has recently provided two-way lorry movement details for the months of August, September and October, and these have all been compliant with the controls set out in extant planning condition 34. The planning application does not seek to alter the levels of traffic agreed in 2013 and formalised under this condition, which is now condition 31 in the schedule of recommended conditions attached to your report. Provided these levels of traffic continue to be strictly followed, there are no highways implications, and the development accords with policy W3.14 of the Waste Local Plan. Condition 9 of the recommended conditions allows for 12 preloaded, sheeted and pre-wheel washed HGVs to leave the site between 6 AM and 7:30 AM. A legal agreement ensures that these HGVs only travel along the A60 and do not travel along Gotham Lane, past nearby residential properties. The legal agreement will be rolled forward should planning permission be granted, and there continues to be sufficient overnight parking for lorries. The County Council has not been able to verify or uphold the noise complaint raised by the Parish Council on behalf of residents. The Monitoring and Enforcement Officer is satisfied that there are no fundamental changes to site operations that could give rise to additional significant noise implications, with no increase in throughput of waste, and activities on the eastern part of the site being limited to storage activities with no significant noise effects. The extended area is in the existing operational area, covered by waste planning controls and environmental permit conditions, with a range of pollution control measures, including controls over noise. It has been concluded that there are no substantive noise implications. The pollution control authorities, that being the Environmental Health Officer and the Environment Agency, have not raised any concerns. It is therefore considered that the revised operations would not exceed the permissible noise criterion detailed in conditions 15 and 16, and the development will continue to comply with policy W3.9 of the Waste Local Plan. Waste operations have the potential to cause adverse impacts as a result of dust emissions. However, policy W310 of the Waste Local Plan identifies that dust emissions can be managed and reduced by implementing appropriate dust mitigation practices. There are established dust suppression measures in place, including a water sprinkler system to spray the storage bay, and there are also sprinklers mounted on the waste transfer building to spray the area to the front of the building. Water bowsers are used to prevent wind whipping of dust. Other measures include minimising drop heights, waste storage heights and volumes of material on site, and reducing the amount of activity on site during windy weather, including no tipping or screening of higher risk loads. Stockpiled IBA and IBA aggregates can potentially create dust when the material is being loaded and transferred within the site during processing. However, potential air emissions are mitigated using the water-based control methods already described, and no other dedicated abatement systems are considered necessary. A new dust management plan has been submitted in support of the planning application, and Rushcliffe Borough Council's Environmental Health Officer has been consulted. The revised dust management plan has demonstrated that an appropriate dust attenuation scheme is capable of being implemented throughout all working areas, including on the extended storage area, and the Environmental Health Officer is satisfied that the scheme covers all proposed operations on the site and that the dust management is both acceptable and achievable. Subject to the reimposition of planning conditions to minimise dust, including limits on stockpile heights, the extended operations are capable of being adequately controlled to prevent residual dust effects off-site in compliance with policy W310 of the Waste Local Plan. The proposals would not alter the waste streams currently managed by the facility or the odour control measures which are regulated and enforced by the EA through their permit, although it should be noted that the operator is prepared to relinquish waste wood processing, which has historically been undertaken on site. In the event that odour incidents are identified, the agency can require the operator to implement further measures by way of an approved odour management plan, with any measures considered necessary to mitigate any side effects off-site. It is not anticipated that the storage of IBA aggregates would be particularly malodorous, being an inert, relatively stable product by this stage. In fact, it is the least odorous element of the waste management process. Whilst any increase in IBA processing activities could potentially generate odour, this has to be balanced against the controls that are already in place across the site through the permit. In the past, when odour has been detected outside the site, it has been intermittent and directly attributable to the volume of unprocessed IBA on the site and excessive stockpile heights. Extant planning conditions will be reimposed to control stockpile heights, and the County Council will continue to work with the operator to bring these heights down. Existing conditions would be carried forward, requiring raw, untreated IBA to be placed and stored in the concrete walled storage bay to a maximum height of 4.5 metres, which reflects the height of the bay, in order to help control the odour from the most malodorous raw untreated stage. Environmental controls covering the waste management operations in order to protect human health would continue to be dealt with under a bespoke environmental permit issued by the EA and enforced by them. Whilst the planning process is concerned about the acceptable use of land, the permit would deal with any pollution impact on human health as raised in representations on the application. The Environment Agency has advised that the permit for the site may need to be varied, which would allow them to review any pollution and health impacts relating to the site. An informative to this effect would be attached to any planning permission granted. On that basis, it is recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to planning conditions set out in Appendix 1 of your report, and by rolling forward the Section 106 legal agreement for lorry routing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I formally move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Creamer formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. We have no speakers on this item, so the floor is yours, colleagues. Does anybody have any comments, observations or questions? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know the site quite well. First of all, I'd like to say retrospective planning applications, I've never been in favour of them, although in this case I believe that the current crisis had a lot to do with that. However, in my opinion, had our inspectors not been on site, would we have known about it? You know, that's a matter for consideration, possibly. I've had no comments from local residents regarding this. However, historically, the way our division was before the boundary changes, Councillor Adair tends to get to know more about that area than I do. But I can say that I travel by the site daily, and one thing I would like to inform members, there is always dust on the road outside when it's a dry, sunny day. If you following a vehicle, a large vehicle that goes by the site, you get covered in a big cloud of dust, and that seems to be there on a continuous basis. And I think if we're mindful to grant permission, I think more work should be looked at into controlling the dust. You know, if it's escaping possibly on the wheels of the vehicles, I don't know. But I think that the company should take more consideration to that side of it. Apart from that, I can honestly say, in the last 4 years, I've had no comments from any residents regarding it, or even the parish councils never contacted me about it either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Mr. Smith, you've already alluded to the fact that there are established dust suppression measures in place. Is there any other comment that you might wish to make in response to Councillor Brown's observations?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, condition 10 of the recommended conditions, which is carried forward from from the previous permission, it does require all heavy goods vehicles leaving the site to use the existing wheel wash facilities, and for vehicles not to drag mud or other material onto the public highway. I mean, on the instances I've driven past or even cycled past there, yes, you do sometimes see some staining on the road. I'm not sure. I've probably not seen a lorry actually leaving at the time when I've been going past and seen the examples of what Councillor Brown has said. But I mean, clearly that condition is in place. It's something that we can keep under review and ask the operator to review their processes as required. But there are controls in place to control that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just a question, but before just moving on to the short question, the dust issue is also there in condition 19 as well, where it's mentioned as well. So it is sort of double dealt with in that respect. It just needs enforcing, obviously. Just a question on page 29, item 70. The Cadent gas limit is 7 Trent Water. Have they made any response? That was the only question. There was going to be a verbal response if they had. I assume they haven't.
They haven't, Councillor Creamer. No, we would have reported anything that was received after the papers were published.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from the comments made by the divisional member and Mr. Smith's response regarding dust, I remember seeing that the first photograph he showed, there was some, I don't know whether it was dust or whether it was sort of like heat vapor coming off the pile of aggregate as it was being operated on. But yes, I've seen the conditions 19 and 20, but if we refer to page 23 and paragraph 30 in relation to dust, and about halfway down the paragraph it says control dusts were in place and generally considered to be effective. Interesting word use of the word generally. I was just wondering if Mr. Smith can tell us what generally means, because to me that indicates it's probably effective most of the time, but not necessarily all the time. So I suppose the follow-up or the supplementary question is, how are we, and this touches on obviously the next item on the agenda, how are we going to monitor that dust control to ensure that it doesn't become a nuisance in the future? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, in fact, the image that you did see, that was actually heat. That was kind of steam. That's the IBA that comes from the East Croft incinerator just up the road from County Hall, and the ash is still quite warm when it is first deposited into those storage bays, and it is left there for a while. But even when they start to process it, it is still quite warm, and that is actually steam that you can see. And I think some of the inquiries we have had in the past has mistaken that steam for dust, but it is actually steam. In terms of monitoring, the site is regularly monitored by monitoring enforcement officers, and that will continue to do so if permission is granted today. All I would do is I will just highlight to monitoring officers that this is a particular concern, a potential dust being drawn onto the road, and we can try and work with the operator to see if there are more measures that can be introduced. Just in reflection to the question about the general effectiveness. I mean, certainly at different times of the year, controlling dust or certainly controlling the deposit of mud onto the highway can be more difficult. But again, that we feel we've got the tools in place through the conditions that are attached to the existing permission in order to deal with those if they do become an issue, and we will continue to be vigilant on that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Does that answer your question, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I'm obliged, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, are you coming back?
Yeah, just to inform members as well that the exit to the site is on a hill, and that residue that's left on the road, when it rains, it's got to run off somewhere, and it runs down towards the village of Goaton. Like to be assured that whatever's running off is safe. It's not having an impact on the local environment.
I mean, the material that is dealt with on site is inert material, be it the IBA or the general construction and demolition waste that is. So it is a dusty inert sediment that if it is being dragged onto the road, I mean, the introduction of a road sweeper might be something that we can explore. I mean. And I suspect they're probably using that at times already, but perhaps more frequent use of that might be something that we can advise the operator to look at.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Thank you.
Councillor Longden, you with us?
Thank you, Chair. I finally got to hear you all earlier. I got in towards the end of Jonathan Smith's presentation, but we've all heard these sort of presentations before about these sort of facilities, so it's nothing new, particularly at the district and the borough levels. But I have to agree with Councillor Brown. I'm never happy about retrospective planning permissions. Now, this company seems to have a habit of it. I did it in 2013 and 14. It's like preempting our decision. But I will agree with the recommendation. That's not a problem, because all they seem to be doing is moving things around so they can increase their work or make it more efficient. It's within the site itself, so it's not extending out into the green belt. This is generally what's known as activities within the green belt. We all come across this from time to time. But I do know all the concerns of the members of the dust and the lawyers, but their answers tend to be self-answering towards the end of the day. But I have noticed that on the enforcement one, retrospective on page 14 is criticised itself, so that will no doubt somewhere we'll speak on that later. Basically, Chair, I have no problem with it, and it's an established site, so I'll move on. Live with you now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. I appreciate that you missed part of the presentation, but obviously you've had the opportunity to read the papers.
Absolutely.
So you hopefully you feel fully informed to be able to make a decision.
Yeah. Stood them quite intently earlier. Good job I did.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. Do I have any other speakers? I don't have any hands up on my screen. Okay, if there are no other speakers, in relation to this application, obviously it is a retrospective application, and the point has been made that the application is before us primarily because of a monitoring inspection, which has led to the company being advised to submit an application to extend the storage site. I obviously have to point out that the fact that an application is retrospective is not in itself grounds for refusal. As much as I'm sure all of us on the committee prefer that applications are made in the appropriate manner before a piece of work is carried out rather than afterwards. The main issues here, as have been identified by Mr. Smith, are dust, noise, HGV movements, odour and potential health issues. I don't intend to repeat what Mr. Smith has said. He addressed each of one of those issues individually. So if there are no other questions for Mr. Smith or observations by members, I will move this matter now to the vote. So I can see no hands. So in order to make this easier in this virtual setting, I will ask the clerk to read out members' names alphabetically in order for them to confirm whether they are voting for or against the recommendations or indeed abstaining. Please note that the votes today will not be recorded in the minutes of the meeting unless 2 or more members request it, in line with the usual recorded vote arrangements. So, Mr. Barker, would you assist us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen?
For.
Councillor Barnfather?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Creamer?
For.
Councillor Fielding?
For.
Councillor Harper?
For.
Councillor Henshaw?
For.
Councillor Longden? Can you hear me, Councillor Longden?
Yeah, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
For.
Councillor Walker?
For.
Councillor Wetton?
For.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. That application is approved. Moving on, please, on the agenda then to item 6, which is the local enforcement plan update. And Mr. Smith, I believe that you are going to address us on this item.
Thank you, Chair. The local enforcement plan sets out the monitoring and enforcement services of the County Council. It explains how the authority deals with alleged breaches of planning control, as well as its proactive role in the inspection of minerals and waste sites. The existing local enforcement plan was adopted in May 2015. Since its adoption, there have been a number of changes affecting enforcement work, including an updated version of the National Planning Policy Framework and revisions to the Planning Practice Guidance. These changes have been reflected in the proposed update version of the local enforcement plan, which forms the appendix to the report and, if approved, would supersede the existing one. The key changes to the plan are set out in paragraph 5 of the report and can be summarised as follows. Updated text from the National Planning Policy Framework and the Planning Practice Guidance, which encourages authorities to have a local enforcement plan. Clarification of the maximum fees payable in relation to enforcement notices, stop notices and temporary stop notices. The revised plan also confirms the provisions under the Proceeds of Crime Act, which may be used in planning enforcement cases to deal with those who flout valid enforcement notices for financial gain. The revised plan introduces the possibility of the County Council using drones in connection with its monitoring and enforcement functions. This may include inspecting and monitoring sites to ensure compliance with planning permissions, including conditions, and to gather evidence in relation to possible breaches of planning control. The plan confirms that the County Council will ensure that it fully complies with relevant regulations, including registration with the Civil Aviation Authority, notifying landowners and properties it is intending to fly over, and compliance with the Data Protection Act and any other statutory requirements. The revised plan provides information about how to report a potential breach of planning control and how complainants' personal details will be treated in accordance with data protection requirements set out in the Development Management Team's privacy notice. The revised plan refers to the resourcing of monitoring and enforcement work and confirms that officers undertake a wide variety of work, from site inspections, complaint investigation and formal enforcement action. Some officers in the development management team split their workloads between monitoring and enforcement and planning application work based on the needs of the team at any time. Fee levels set out in the revised plan have been amended to reflect current fee levels, which are £397 for active, partially active sites and £132 for dormant sites. These fees are nationally set and have increased from £331 and £110 respectively. The monitoring and enforcement legislative and policy framework relied upon is set out in the appendix to the revised local enforcement plan. And finally, the revised plan confirms that a report will be brought to Planning and Licensing Committee every 12 months, which will provide members with the details of all monitoring and enforcement work undertaken in the preceding 12 months. Members will recall such a report being brought to committee this July. Other sections of the revised local enforcement plan set out enforcement and complaint procedures, including the various enforcement tools available to the authority for dealing with breaches or alleged breaches of planning control. Chapters 6 and 7 respectively cover the involvement of council members and legal services in monitoring and enforcement work. The recommendation is that members endorse the updated version of the local enforcement plan and recommends it to Policy Committee for adoption as County Council policy. And we are targeting a Policy Committee meeting in January 2021. If approved, the plan will replace the existing 2015 version and will be available electronically on the County Council's website. Myself and Tim Turner, the Senior Monitoring Enforcement Officer, will be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We have a recommendation. I formally move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, Councillor Creamer, formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Members, over to you. Any questions, comments, observations for the officers or just generally for committee members? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to refer to the use of drones, which is a very useful and welcome addition to enforcement. Page 81, 2.19. A couple of things. Firstly, it does talk about making sure we comply with legislation and regulatory requirements, etc. But there are new licensing regulations now in place for use of drones, and having just gone through that certificate myself for commercial operations, I would suggest that we need to ensure that if we're using any drone activity, that you're using a competent operator for commercial operations. And secondly, or more of a question, will drone evidence, if a case comes to court for non-compliance, will drone evidence be admissible in a court case? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We had a similar discussion at our pre-agenda meeting, Councillor Clark, about a policy for the authority as a whole in relation to use of drones, because clearly they're used in other areas of county council work now, as they are indeed used by many other established companies and commercial businesses. Mr. Smith, over to you, please.
Yeah, I was going to confirm that point, Chair, that yeah, there have been wider discussions with officers across the authority about the use of drones for for various activities, of which planning and enforcement work would be just one of those. You know, before any drone is used, you know, we will make sure that you know, we have the proper procedures and policies in place, which will come through a committee at some point before they're starting to be used. I don't know if Tim wants to come back on the second point in terms of the use of drone footage in any enforcement case.
Clearly, thank you for that. Clearly, we're at an early stage at the moment in terms of that, but obviously it will be something we will be looking to do move forward if that's information that will support any cases we have. But in doing so, anything we collect will have to follow the current court procedure rules and evidence collection rules that are provided. So we will be following those procedures to make evidence admissible if we need it.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine, Chairman. Thank you very much. I'll watch events unfold with keen interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brown, you've got your hand up. I'm assuming, Councillor Brown, that it's in relation to Chapter 6 member involvement in monitoring and enforcement work, and you being a holder of a pilot licence, you're going to offer to be a drone operator, is that?
No, I was so involved in the airspace requirements in the drone on the East Midlands Airport Drone Advisory Committee. There was a few of us on that where we were putting in our knowledge for airspace requirements, etc. That was a few years ago. I would welcome drones, though. I know how well they work, both at the Fire Authority in collaboration with the police. They're very successful, and we've had some very good success stories following it. But my only question is, it states that you're going to get landowners' permission to fly over to do the enforcement. Now, are you going to inform the owner of the land what you're trying to enforce, or is this surrounding households? It seems a bit silly telling them that we're going to be coming next Thursday to do an aerial inspection. Surely it's the element of surprise to catch them out.
Mr. Smith or Mr. Turner, who would like to take that tricky question?
I think there's there's differences, I think, in terms of whether we carry out covert or overt use of drones. You know, at the end of the day, I think you know, if we are going to use them in terms of gathering evidence to take enforcement action, we need to you know, that we might have to let operators know that we are going to use them. Maybe even just the threat of using them might actually bring about compliance. Who knows? I don't know if Tim's got anything else to add.
I mean, clearly with a lot of the breaches we deal with, they aren't instantaneous. So there will be sort of traces on the ground. So giving them advance notice that we're going to go and check some unauthorised waste tipping, for example, if that gets them to clear it, as Jonathan says, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, it's unlikely to have been cleared, and that will allow us to confirm where we are in terms of compliance or how much material has been tipped. In terms of instantaneous breaches, then clearly that does present some issues, but there are other options of using, as we said previously, other people's, the neighbours' land, and notifying them if we can do so, and also potentially just taking images from the public highway if that's possible as well. But again, that's something else, as the procedure and the policies move forward, we'll get some further details from.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Turner. I mean, it may well be that ultimately that it will be a standard condition of any future application that effectively there is a permission granted for the use of drones over certain sites. I've no idea, but that's a wider authority policy to yet to be determined. Again, does that answer your question, Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Taylor, I think your hand was raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was looking at page 94 about the legislative and policy framework, and I note that we reference where else guidance is and where local policies are. Now, in terms of my casework, I would say that I have more enforcement inquiries about things that are our district partners' domain rather than our own. And I noticed that on this page we reference various local plans as produced by our district and borough council partners. So I suppose it's to help my understanding really. Are our partners also required to have an enforcement policy? And in crafting this, have we been minded of their policies as well as their local plans? Not least because so many of our partners don't have fully formed and adopted local plans yet, which must make life quite difficult all round. But I suppose it's really just to help me and inform me. Do our district partners also have enforcement plans, or should they?
Well, Councillor Taylor, as I set out in my presentation, the National Planning Policy Framework certainly encourages planning authorities to have a local enforcement plan. So, I mean, I honestly don't know in terms of all the individual districts and boroughs whether they have them in place. I think Rushcliffe certainly has a policy in place, but I can't account for others, other districts. And in terms of the reference to the various local plans in that appendix of the report, I mean, it's just a reflection really that when we are looking at enforcement action and in terms of breaches of planning control, in much of the same way that our planning reports to you we don't only consider policies in our minerals and waste local plans. We quite often refer to policies in the relevant district council's local plan in order to assess the acceptability of a particular planning application in terms of trying to understand a breach of planning control. We won't only look to the minerals and waste local plan for guidance, but we might also look for what are the restrictions on a particular piece of land from the district council's point of view in terms of determining whether it's we should be taking enforcement action or not. So I think that's why those district and borough council plans are referenced in that appendix. We look at the development plan policies as a whole and not just our own minerals and waste local plans.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Turner, I know you and I have met historically with district council enforcement officers to discuss issues. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think all the districts have a local plan in place, and they're obviously all following the same framework as per the guidance. So they again have commitments that they've signed up to in terms of their enforcement service as well. So, and we do liaise with district enforcement officers if there are overlapping issues to do with sites to try and have a joined up approach to ensure that things are dealt with effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. I'll just do a little bit more local homework because I'm not convinced in my local case, but I appreciate the officers' responses.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Do I have any more questions, comments or observations, please? I can't see any hands raised, so in which case we'll move to the vote, please. And again, as with the previous item, in order to make this easier in this virtual setting, I will again ask the clerk to read out members' names alphabetically in order for them to confirm whether they are abstaining, voting for or against the recommendation. And again, the votes today will not be recorded in the manner in which we would know that it was a recorded vote, unless two or more members requested. Mr. Barker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Barnfather.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Creamer.
For.
Councillor Fielding.
For.
Councillor Harper.
For.
Councillor Henshaw.
For.
Councillor Longdon. Can you hear me, Councillor Longdon?
Get myself off mute. For.
All right, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Wetton.
For.
It's carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. The plan update is therefore approved. Thank you, colleagues. If I can now move on to item 7 on your agenda, Development Management Progress Report. I'm going to ask Mrs. Gill to introduce this item, and at the end of it, I'm going to ask Mr. Smith just to update us on a couple of other issues which may be of interest to members. So, Mrs. Gill, please.
Thank you, Chair. As ever, this is the regular update report for members, setting out the applications we've received and the applications that have been determined, and also the schedule of applications that we propose to bring to the next meeting of this committee. And on that topic, for the 5th of January, we've got an application at the British Sugar Corporation in Newark on the agenda, or on the possible agenda. There will also be another application relating to a classroom proposal in Kirkby and Ashfield, so that will also be included on the agenda for you in January. In terms of overall progress, at paragraphs 3 and 4 in the paper, we just give you, as members of the Planning and Licensing Committee, an update on where we have got to with the preparation of the Minerals Local Plan. And as Mr. Smith has referred to in his presentations and in the discussion on the previous report, the use of local plans is an important part of consideration of planning applications. The Nottinghamshire Minerals Local Plan had a virtual examination at the end of October, and the team are just finalising the proposed modifications to the document that came out of that discussion, and they will then be published for a consultation period. And then following that, the inspector will look at those responses and will complete his final report to the authority on the local plan. And I would hope that we could then proceed towards adoption of the plan, but we will keep this committee updated on that progress. And just 2 other issues, but these might be the issues that the chair was going to ask Mr. Smith. The members at the recent committee dealt with the planning application relating to Daneshill. We're still waiting for information or response back from the National Casework Unit as to what they're going to do. We had hoped we would get something within 3 weeks of our committee, but they have now written to advise us that we're not going to hear from them until the beginning of December. So we'll keep you updated on that. And for members' information, we have just received a planning application from iGas at Misson. They're looking to extend the evaluation and restoration period of the site for a further 3 years until 2023. And that application has only just come in. So it came in after the papers for this committee were published. So we will be showing on subsequent committee papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. So we have a recommendation on page 98 of our papers. The committee considers whether there are any actions they require in relation to the contents of the report. I'll formally move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Creamer, formally second.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments for Mrs. Gill or Mr. Smith? Nope, I'm not seeing any hands. In that case, I've moved a recommendation, so we do need to take a vote on it. I'll just do this verbally. If anybody has an objection, please speak out or forever hold your peace. Other than that, I'll take it that this recommendation is approved. Okay, I'm getting no indications of dissent, in which case that does bring this meeting to a timely close. Exactly 1 hour, despite the IT issues experienced by Councillor Longden after our last meeting, which was a little longer. So I think we deserved a short meeting today. Thank you, colleagues, for attending, and I look forward to catching up with you at some point in the future. Mrs. Gill and Mr. Smith, could I ask you to stay on the call for 2 minutes, if you will?